Let's begin with who JP is and your experience, just to share the audience about what you're doing in Cape Town. Are you here for holidays?
Okay,
Beach?
sure. No, I wish. I'm here on work. I came to Johannesburg and Cape Town to speak at a conference, Blockchain Africa,
Right.
on the benefits of blockchain and the regulation of cryptocurrencies, and to share my experience as well and Malta's experience in this regard. So just to give a bit of introduction to myself, I'm an economist. I am today a director at ARQ, which is a professional services firm in Malta, and we handle the regulation and the licensing of a number of crypto exchanges and ICOs out of Malta. Prior to this, I was an assistant to the former Prime Minister of Malta, the Governor of the Central Bank, and then I did international advisory, whereby I worked with 9 different governments to implement economic regulation and visions for sectors in different countries.
Awesome. That's a lot of work.
Pretty much.
So have you're an economist, you said, but
Yes.
have you read The Black Swan?
Yes.
What do you think about that guy?
Very, very good, powerful book, which shows as well the realities of the world that we live in.
Right.
So it's always, I think, we're living in a world where there's a lot of sort of chaos happening, different things or forces, sometimes contradictory, happening around us, and it's the way we manage to organize ourselves as individuals, companies, and countries amidst this chaos to build that resilience and responsiveness that we can find, and then our own niche to actually develop and build something good.
Malta is kind of making a lot of noise in terms of blockchain. There's a lot going on there. Just tell us why Malta right now? Why is it hot? Why should people go there, and why are others already going there?
Sure. So let me give you a bit of background to Malta, because this will set the scene why companies are coming here.
Yeah.
So Malta is a very small island in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, just between Italy and Africa. Very small island, 440,000 population on an area of 300 square kilometers. So you can just imagine how small that is. And we don't have any natural resources, no mines, no oil, no nothing. What we do have, and what we have always used, is the power of regulation. So back in the days, and I'm saying in the 1960s, the policymakers said, why would companies come to Malta? Because the market is very small, right? So it is only today that we're 420,000. In the 1960s, we were much less. So the question was, we need to create a framework within which companies, international companies, will come, establish themselves in Malta, and generate wealth. And this is something that we have been doing so successfully over the years. So we developed financial services, we developed a maritime register, which today is the 3rd largest in the world. We developed an aviation register. We developed certain incentives and laws which made pharmaceutical companies come to Malta to manufacture the drugs in Malta. So whereas a lot of companies or countries are hesitant on regulation, Malta always took the first mover advantage. And as soon as we see a sector or a niche area developing, we decide that we should regulate it and be the first to regulate. This also happened in remote gaming, online casinos, sports betting. Back in 2007 and 8, we were the first country to realize that this is going to really grow. So we were seeing the emergence of smart mobile phones, people betting, the internet, everyone is connected, that is going to change lives, and gaming and betting is going to start being big on internet. So whereas out there it was a wild, wild west, the Maltese government at the time said, let us regulate online betting. And that's what we did. And today we are the capital, the global capital of remote gaming companies. And the same happened with blockchain. As soon as the government realized that blockchain technology was here to stay, and also the advent of cryptocurrencies was going to revolutionize the world as we know it, we decided to take the plunge, and in actual fact we were the first country that came out with a very broad, wide, deep regulatory framework that not only looks at the blockchain technology but also looks at the different applications. So we're looking at ICOs, we're looking at STOs, we're looking at exchanges. So the Maltese government, I would say, was very brave in this area, and today I would say that we have the world's largest players, or a very good percentage of those, based and coming to Malta.
Do you want to share some of the kind of well-known companies in the blockchain space that
so
are registered?
Binance, for example,
Yes.
is registered and has its headquarters in Malta, and it's developing. OKX, Neufund. We also have a large number of ICOs that have been launched as well, based in Malta, but we also have some other interesting developments in the pipeline that will continue positioning Malta as the center of this new blockchain-driven business era.
So that is very interesting, because it now brings us to a point where one would wonder, like say in Africa or even in America, why are other jurisdictions struggling with regulating blockchain? You know, they, instead of actually finding a way to accommodate it, they a little bit defensive against it.
Yeah, I think it's a question of how you view regulation as well. In the sense, the question that one needs to answer is, how do you go about regulating a new world order?
Yes.
Right? So I think it's a question of squaring two circles, in the sense, or squaring two worlds. So we have a legal order which has been based on a world order which is very much still based on papers, processes, words, and all of that. In parallel, we have a new world order that is coming on stream, which is driven by bytes, 24/7, happening around jurisdictions, business models which are disruptive, and all of this. So you need to be very, very fast and agile to try and see how you're going to converge these two. The beauty of Malta is that it is very small, so it might be easier to do that. However, I think that the biggest contribution that Malta made from a regulatory point of view is that it highlighted the difference between blockchain as an underlying technology and then distinguishing the various applications that sit on top of blockchain. So cryptocurrencies is just one.
Yes.
My biggest worry out there is that due to the focus on cryptocurrency, everyone is making the mistake that blockchain is equal to cryptocurrency, when in reality that is not. So the Maltese regulator took a very different approach, looked at certifying the underlying technology, and then applying regulations depending on the application or the use case of blockchain accordingly. So if it's ICOs, there is a regulation. If it's STOs, there is a separate regulation. If we're talking of an exchange, there is a separate regulation. Right? So, but bearing in mind one key fundamental or two fundamental things. The regulation is not there to stifle innovation, so we want to continue being a hotbed or a test bed for blockchain innovation. And second, the most important thing is that central to the regulation, especially from a crypto side, is investor protection. So the Maltese regulator wants to protect those investors that are investing in ICOs, just to make sure that the ICOs are not fraudulent, right, or not mere jokes that will take investors for a ride.
Yes.
So I think that is something which is very important. From a regulatory point of view, I would say that usually regulators as well are always there to ensure the financial stability of the system. In the case of cryptos, it is important to note that the risks to the economy are very, very small, because we're not looking at a mass adoption like the banking system was in 2008, right? So from that front, the risks are much more dilute than they were in 08.
Right.
The concerns that do come up is in terms of money laundering, financing of terrorism using cryptocurrencies. So over there, you need checks and balances, you need KYC procedures and all of that to ensure that countries do not become a vehicle or a route for that form of criminal activity as well.
On the other hand, regulation, right? One can complain about KYC or money laundering, but what are there any other technologies coming up by regulators to make sure that they're protecting themselves too, putting something as a solution instead of just say, hey, we're worried about this?
Whereas we were saying that some regulators might fret or might be not comfortable on blockchain, in reality, blockchain is one of the most secure technologies when it comes to KYC.
Yes.
Right, so it can provide solutions to regulators, to governments, and make life easier for individuals and companies as well from a KYC perspective. So unfortunately, I go back to one of my first points. It is very important to make the distinction between blockchain and the cryptocurrencies, because the technology itself is so transformative, it is so revolutionary, that it can bring about lots of changes and bring efficiencies across government, public services, business, financial services, and it can also bring about, in developing countries, big social and economic gains.
Right.
We're talking about banking the unbanked. We're talking about giving access to services to people who did not have. We are actually talking about giving people identity who do not have yet one. And out there we're talking of 2.1 billion people without an identity. So the blockchain can actually bring big changes on a social level, economic level, and also on an environmental level. It can help us monitor disasters, climate changes, making sure that there is an audit trail as well of pollution and these sort of things, right? So the blockchain itself is a revolutionary force, which the true power of the blockchain is yet to come, because blockchain can't be seen as a silo activity. Blockchain needs to be seen as one of a number of technologies that, when all will come together, the impact will be huge. And over there we are talking about blockchain, we are talking about artificial intelligence, we are talking about big data, and we are talking about the Internet of Things, IoT.
Yeah.
Those four forces together will be a very powerful force.
So my question was, why are regulators incapable of coming up their own solutions to solve whatever problem they're facing? Like, say, cryptocurrency is a technological problem, right? If they're having problems with it, to make sure that the KYC is being done correctly, why, instead of building a technology that allows them to do what they want, they rather just block things in the way, which kind of stifles innovation? In the way.
I think this is a chronic issue with a lot of public services and governments around the world. So the technologies, the use of e-government has been around for a number of years, but not everyone has harnessed or enabled such change to occur. Then you have countries like Malta or like Estonia, for example, which are true pioneers and revolutionaries in the sense. So I think it very much depends on the government commitment to innovation, the commitment of the public sector to innovation, and the belief that things can be done differently, but also can be done better than they were usually done.
Right. So now let's look at cryptocurrencies per se.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on it, and how is Malta kind of regulating, or how do you look at? You say you have worked with the governor before, so when things like that come to mind, what were your first thoughts?
Sure. So currently, as we all know, cryptocurrency is very much given a lot of attention. Why? Because there's a lot of money attached to it. Right? We've seen price rallies with Bitcoin price going up, and then we've seen the market crash, we've seen bullish markets, and now we're in a bearish phase. So a lot of hype has been done and said. And there are a lot of conceptual questions whether cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin is money, and there's a whole economic debate. What I can say is that I do believe that cryptocurrencies will bring a lot of changes in the future. There's a lot of potential, but the technology is yet to be matured, right? If we're looking at Bitcoin, we're talking about the proof of work, and that has a bit of issues when it comes to transactions, transaction speed, and all of that. So I think the technology needs to mature. We need to see that it scales up and reduces a lot of energy use and a bit of inefficiencies. But I think the biggest breakthrough will come when we will have a central bank issuing a digital currency.
Like what JP Morgan is doing?
JP Morgan is the first institutional investor to actually issue a digital currency. So over there, the fact that JP Morgan came in, we're already seeing that the institutions are believing in this sort of new technology. We're also seeing that the IMF is very, very pro cryptocurrencies. Christine Lagarde, the director of IMF, has said that it is a technology that the central banks need to look at, because this can bring about big improvements in national economies. So if we have an economy, for example, that is very vulnerable to exchange volatility or inflation, like what happened with Venezuela, cryptocurrencies can actually be a method or a technology that will bring that much needed stability in the currency. Once you have stability in your currency, you are competitive on a trade basis. You can export more. Once you export more, you have to produce more. If you produce more, then you need to employ more people. If you employ more people, you reduce poverty. So I think the use of cryptocurrencies can be a very important moment in economic history. However, it needs much more ownership from regulators, governments, and these institutional players.
Why do you think that? Why do you think that it needs more?
I think
what's wrong with peer-to-peer finance in your view?
No, peer-to-peer financing is not an issue, but I think for mass adoption, for people to actually gain trust, right, in it, and make sure that there are not scams as well, the regulation needs to be crafted in a way to protect the individual user, so that each individual user knows that the service he or she are using is actually protected by law, and it gives them the guarantees and the safeguards that any other regulation would give.
So besides, say, the scalability issue that Bitcoin has, from your regulatory point of view, what do you think would be the problem of using something like Bitcoin as a currency when it's not attached to any sort of government?
Yes.
To have like an open.
Well, so here we can go into a number of economic debates, right? So how would you define money? How would you define a currency? You're talking of, is it a store of wealth? Now, when we're seeing such price volatility, then you can't really use it as a store of wealth. Medium of exchange. How easy is it to go to the bar here at the hotel and order a whiskey and pay by Bitcoin. So the potential is there.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're just at the very beginning. So it mass adoption will happen, and it might not be Bitcoin, it might be another type
Yep.
of coin. So we might see the emergence of stable coins as being crucial to the digitization of the monetary system. We might have a national currency which is backed by a central bank, which that gives you the store of wealth,
Mm-hmm.
the pegging to, for example, gold or something like that, right? So I think we're only at the very beginning, and I think we also need to remember that we need to look at from even where the internet started,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the internet started way back in the 60s with a military experiment, right, on how to send information across different stations. Today we use the internet as if it were always there.
Yep.
So we buy everything over the internet and it gets delivered to our house. So the internet has gone through an evolutionary phase. Bitcoin came on stream 8 years ago. Already we're seeing a lot of adoptions on blockchain. So I think it has to go through this phase of maturity as well.
So one thing that I wanted to get, a lot of people told me to ask you, because I knew I was having an interview with you, was that what threat does something like Bitcoin creates to become? I think the right way to question this is, what is the threat of having a decentralized currency? Is there a problem with that?
Well, I don't think we should actually talk about threats. I think we need to make sure that
when I say threat, I just meant an economic threat.
Yeah. I think we need to make sure that no formal system is destabilized as well.
Okay.
Right? So I think it's a question of, as I said before, squaring the two worlds, making sure that we have a legal order and economic order that is able to deal with the revolutionary pace of technology and the disruptive business models. So I don't say that it's wrong
Mm-hmm.
to talk about a decentralized set of money. We just need to make sure that there are the checks and balances in place so that individuals and companies will not be the result or the victims of a scam. Right? So although the blockchain is a very good technology that builds trust, I believe that technology itself will not give that trust automatically. We need to create the parameters in which that trust is further built and reinforced by the institutions as well. So it's about converging these two areas together.
Right. So I don't want to waste too much of your time. I don't know how much time you got. So in Africa right now, we have seen a lot of Bitcoin transactions taking place. I think it's one of those places where people are using something like Bitcoin, as an example, with a real use case that they want to send money, because it's so difficult to send money to each other. I don't know why that problem. I mean, to a millennial like myself, I still don't understand why it's difficult to send money from South Africa to Kenya or South Africa to wherever I want, right? So we have seen a lot of adoption of the Bitcoin as actually a currency that people use to transfer. From what you understand and what you know, what do you think are the major blocks for expansion in the African economy?
Well, I think, as you said, the African use case is very interesting. Why? Because it shows the limits of the traditional financial system, right? So the use of blockchain happened because the system that we were currently being used to is not solving people's problems, right? So people ingenuously and then started using a system which managed to deliver what they wanted. And the African case is also very interesting because it shows a very important thing that will show what the next stage of the revolution is. and that is the use of mobile phones.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So Africa and some countries in Africa might not have a fully fledged financial institution with bank branches and villages and all of that. But then we have a lot of people, or most people, that are connected through a mobile phone. So that mobile phone is actually your key to access a financial system,
Yes.
and not only. So the blockchain technology, the peer-to-peer economy, is brilliantly set for mass adoption in Africa. So I think the potential is there. The potential is there, I would say, not only from a financial point of view, but the potential is there from a governance point of view.
Absolutely.
The potential is there from an identity point of view. So I think the potential needs to be framed around how can blockchain help African countries leapfrog the progression of traditional institutions. And I think blockchain is going to be a revolutionary force for the benefit of all. But it is now, it's very much dependent on the governments as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that certain players need to take a key role in promoting this use. So we need to see that the governments are on board, we need to see that the central banks are on board, we need to see that the private sector as well itself needs to be a main catalyst for this change to happen. And as well, the young generation, the millennials that are very much wired in this new frame of the world, should take an active approach through universities, through lobby groups, through programs like this, to actually show the benefits that blockchain can bring to the general population at large.
All right, that's fantastic. So lastly, I'm just gonna ask, how can people get hold of you, or what's the process for, let's say, startups who want to get incorporated in Malta? And also, very lastly, when we were in Johannesburg, there was a guy who asked a very good question, I thought, but I don't think his question was answered fairly. I think he was the last person to ask a question. Basically, it was saying one side of things where regulation comes in is to make sure that obviously the investors are not being defrauded. But at the same time, we had a 2008 crash, for example, which wiped out a lot of people, and a lot of people lost. There was nothing to gain. And then this is, say, an ICO economy that happened last year. It allowed people to invest their own money in things, and then a lot of them lost money. But I don't think there were people that actually went out there and started to claim that, hey, I lost money to this, and then trying to sue some other company. The risk was personal, and people understood that.
Yes.
And so I don't understand, why is it a problem that I think there's too much regulation on what people can personally invest in, but there isn't that amount of force into institutions. I think it's more of an expert problem, whereas, well, we trust that you can invest with the banks. Whether they lose it or not, it's a different story. But then for yourself, you can't really invest it.
Yes. So there's a very good point. So let's look at the 2008 financial crisis.
Yeah.
What happened in the run-up to the 2008 financial crisis? We had people that were giving money to banks, and the banks were creating all these funny products, leveraging debt and doing all these derivatives, crazy things. Then you had a house market that fell, and the whole world followed suit. So in that case, what we were seeing was that we were delegating our trust to regulated institutions, and then they misplaced that trust. So over there we had a fundamental problem with trust. Now, let's look at the blockchain. The blockchain is an answer to that, because the blockchain gives you a protection or a layer of trust, because everything is on the blockchain. You can audit and you can see what is happening. In the 2008, no one knew what was
No
happening.
transparency.
No transparency. So the blockchain gives you the transparency and it gives you the trust. Now, what do investors do? Yes, it is important that we do not remove the free choice from people, because that is the most important thing that us humans have. Free will and choice. So if I want to invest my money in X, I need to be free to invest my money in X. So what does the regulation do, and where does the regulation do? The regulation must ensure that X is truthful and transparent, not what you do. So the regulation needs to make sure that the issuer of the ICO knows what is doing, that the people behind the ICO have a business plan, know what they're going to do when they receive the money, because what you do not want to do is be painted a picture that you're going to invest in an ICO and receive 20% return.
Right.
But then the issuers of X will receive the money and go and buy Ferraris and Lamborghinis instead. It happened.
Right.
So the regulation is not about limiting the choice of the individual investor. The regulation is there as a filter to make sure that the investment opportunity presented by an issuer is real.
Right. So, but that is a very good answer. But at the same time, I have seen things. I mean, the market has changed in a point that our crowd sales were much popular in 2017. Right. Everybody could invest. I think it's a good thing. It shows potential for the small guy to get involved in financial markets, because historically these markets have been only exploited by wealthy people already. Right. But the problem is now you see that for you want to invest in an ICO, there's even for an investor's part, there's a lot of KYC to be done in which some people don't have, and also the limit. Now it's more all about private investments, minimum $10,000 up, because of regulations. So I think that it's stifling the opportunity, and also it's being unfair to the small guy.
Yes, I mean there's a very delicate line as well, and I think regulators need to also see that there is always in life a percentage of failure. So, although ICOs have, some have succeeded, some not. I mean, even if we look at crowdfunding platforms, not all projects go through.
Actually, most of them fail.
Most of them fail, right? So I was seeing the latest statistics from, for example, Kickstarter. 65% of projects on Kickstarter don't go through.
Yeah.
So I think the ICO market is very much a parallel of what happens in other markets as well. The same with young startups that go and float on the stock exchange. Not everyone succeeds.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is find this golden balance between making sure that an ICO is trustworthy, but then making sure that the individuals can actually benefit and invest. Because if we're looking at the creation of a peer-to-peer economy, if we're looking at a technology that is all about inclusivity and accessibility to the financial system, we need to make sure that we do not limit the access ourselves through laws and regulations. So I think there are a number of lessons that the regulators need to learn. We need to look at regulations that are not one size fits all, right? That they are risk-weighted, that they are carved in a way that is able to ensure that the young investors, the small investors participate as well.
Yeah.
So I would say the headache is all on the regulator to make sure that all this works. But it is not only regulations that creates the system. So in order for blockchain and cryptocurrencies to be truly effective, we need to start talking about the ecosystem around all of this. And regulation is just one part, right? So we need to make sure that our educational institutions are actually contributing by educating our young people in programming skills, on the blockchain, in all of that. We need to make sure that the banks and the financial systems accept such new technologies as well. We also need to have governments that adopt a vision that believes in the inclusivity and accessibility of its people and is able to embrace technology to achieve that. So regulation is just one lever, right? We need all other cogs to work and ensure that this system actually kicks off.
Awesome. JP, I don't want to waste too much of your time. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks.
Have a great stay further.
Thank you, and hope to be back.
All right.